Bernard Wakoli, I'm sure you're probably one who is well versed with mother tongue. But there's a story here on page 4. I guess majority of us here probably can speak mother tongue, but that's something that is fast fading. But there's a story here on page 4. Renowned author defends mother tongue in schools. And actually what he says is that this is Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and he says that it is, he finds it embarrassing that there are some children who cannot speak their mother tongue. And if I remember correctly, he did at one time mention that this is the height of being colonized.
Yeah, I think, Mike, it's very important that we look at it differently, because currently there's this issue of modernization and globalization that is taking shape, and you can't really put a line which is the mother tongue that a child needs to speak, because at the moment you have families and we have like
intermarriages.
Yeah, intermarriages where people are marrying from different communities. So a child is born from maybe a Luya, Kikuyu, or a Luo, Kalenjin parents. Now, to what extent will this child start speaking both the two languages? Because he comes from, or she comes from.
So what do you feel as a bridge gap? They speak English, and by the way, soon they're going to be introducing Mandarin. So
I think from the time we're even in school, children who were being punished. There was this thing, a disc, that was being put on our necks for speaking mother tongue, and you are punished harshly. But I feel the schools should be accommodative in terms of allowing children who can speak mother tongue just to express themselves informally. But again, teaching mother tongue in schools, I don't think if it will be a unifying factor, because we have schools that are in cosmopolitan area where children cannot really speak one vernacular. So they have two languages, English and Kiswahili, that they can easily communicate in. But in far-flung areas, like in rural areas, we can allow children to interact in mother tongue wherever, wherever
Mark
they move
Bichachi,
around.
your thoughts? Well, first of all, let me just quote something Ngugi wa Thiong'o says. He says, "We are normalizing an absurdity by denying our children their natural language."
Let's first debunk Wakoli's defense of children not being able to speak mother tongue.
Because of being intermarried.
He sits here able to speak Swahili, able to speak English, and able to speak Luya, and then try to defend that his children cannot speak Kalenjin and Luo and Luya at the same time. That's absurdity. Let's be honest. Number two is let's be clear. There's a social experiment called South Africa, which has 11 of its local languages as part of its national language. And it's a thing of beauty to see in cosmopolitan areas, people speaking Zulu, Xhosa, Pedi, and all these things in the middle of Pretoria, in the middle of Durban, in the middle of Port Elizabeth. So what excuse have we with our small little towns that do not even compare? The budget of Durban is nearly the GDP of Kenya. So let's not start pretending that it's not possible. It is because the biggest problem that we have is we consider speaking your mother tongue as illiteracy. We consider that someone who cannot speak Swahili but speaks their language very well is not educated. That's the problem. The truth is that if you go to countries like Sweden, how many languages can a Swede speak? From Swedish itself to English to another one. Why are they proud about their languages and we are not? So for me, as far as I'm concerned, I agree with Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Let's learn all the languages. In fact, don't stop at your mother tongue. Learn the next one. Learn some Luo, learn some Kalenjin. There's nothing wrong with that, because that is our culture. That is what we got. And there are certain things that the way we express them in our languages cannot be expressed in any other languages. And then why would we not do that now, so that people like Wakoli tomorrow, when they're 60 years old, begin to write a book in Luya so that they can save the language? Save the language now. Talk to your children.
Frederick, your thoughts on this?
I think, first of all, we need to understand that the official language is Kiswahili and English in Kenya under Article 7. And we also need to understand that it is the function of the state to promote indigenous languages, and that is a constitutional requirement. So when we have these other languages, then what is the government doing to ensure that the people that do not speak those languages also understand them, apart from the personal initiative. But I think it is important that we all try to understand and learn others' language as a form of communication. I'll give you an example. During the 2007 post-election violence, there are people who come from the Kenyan north. They are called the Turkana. If you look at them, they would easily pass for Luos. And during that time, if you remember, there was violence and there are tribal violences. So somebody would easily confuse them for a tribe that they are not. And imagine if they were speaking a language that the attacker is speaking. It is easier for you to agree and communicate, even though it is a very sad moment at that time. But I think I agree with Ngugi. What the government needs to do today, we need to ensure that we promote these indigenous languages. Either it's early stages of learning or at a later stage of learning. I've seen people in the university, like University of Nairobi, trying to learn Kiswahili. They're learning Kiswahili. The Chinese have come to this country, they're learning Kiswahili. Japanese sing in Kiswahili. And that's not their indigenous language. So it is important. The good thing or the beauty of Kenyan languages, they're very beautiful. When you speak them, you feel very proud. So I think that it's high time that probably we try and understand each other's language. I need to know Kikuyu, I need to know, even without intermarrying. We have friends, we work in offices where people are coming from different diversities. Why don't we just converse in one of the languages? And maybe, instead of being told we have car free day, let's have one language free day, one day, you know.
And how do you do the language free day?
Just
you
to
meet
add on
someone
that,
and speak to them in a language that you think they belong to.
just to add on that, it's unfortunate that since 2010, since the time we promulgated the 2010 Constitution, till now, no initiative has been taken to translate the most important document into vernacular languages. People are still, reading or accessing Constitution in either English or Kiswahili. I think efforts should be made to have the Constitution in a language that people
that would sound
understand.
like we're cutting the tree from the top, in the sense that we're not even promoting speaking of local languages, but here we are now interpreting or translating the Constitution
But
into...
where is the Bible translated in all the...
No, the Bible, I think there are enough. There are quite a number of languages that it's been translated into, and yet, but one might also ask whether the Quran is, translated into vernacular.
No,
but I think they don't.
You cannot
They don't do that.
translate the Quran into... You let us be in trouble.
Yeah, but there you go. I don't know what your thoughts are, especially in terms of vernacular, and whether you agree with Ngugi or Thiong'o that for those who cannot speak their vernacular, because I have a 17-year-old and his thinking sometimes is, how does vernacular help me in this day and age? How does it, there seems to be a loss of the pride in the local and cultural language.
This is a very uniquely Kenyan problem. That for us, we want things that help us. Now, let me ask him a question. How does painting his house help him? How does an art piece on his house help him? How does the picture on your screen lock help you? Life is not about function. You understand? And to talk about life in function is to rob it of its flavor and its pomp and its color. What is the function of all of us being in courts right now, other than colonization? You see,
No, cold, it's cold.
it's cold. It's not that cold.
And who defines smart anyway?
Exactly. So the truth is that you do not learn a language for function. And this is the problem with a lot of people. You learn a language for art, you learn a language for inclusivity in terms of being able to go across the divide and then interact with people who are not of the same tribes, creed, and color as you. So that's why we learn languages. We don't learn languages because it's functional. You don't, for example, we all know that Swahili is considered an official language in this country. Which of us has signed a contract in Swahili, surely? You understand? So it is not about the ability of it to be functional, but the diversity, the art and the culture, and the feeling of being Kenyan that we're trying to propagate. It does not need to be functional.
All right, let's look at a different paper, and now we move on to The Nation. The headline is pretty much the same story that is running on the Standard, how banks clean dirty NYS money. So we've already talked about that. But there's also another very interesting article here. Where did that tilapia come from? And this is to do with Chinese fish. Now that we're talking about languages and culture, it looks like we may need to learn a bit of Chinese just to, be able to get by and eat our fish. But I still don't understand, and gentlemen, maybe help me debunk this or deconstruct this, how it is that fish coming from China ends up being cheaper than, fish coming from Kenya, if at all this is real fish. Let's start with you, Frederick.
It's unfortunate that today when you go to Kisumu, where you can fish and come at the shore and enjoy your fish, it's very expensive. That is true. I tasted this 3 weeks ago. But what comes from China, which is imported, and the media reported yesterday, the import is there at the tune of 1.7 billion. Look at how we are killing the fish economy in this country. We are literally killing. This is because the government has allowed these Chinese to come and do business in Kenya and ignored their local fishermen. And if you look at that fish, there have also been allegations that it is not the real fish that people eat.
Actually, Chinese, on this article, it says it has traces of mercury, lead,
correct,
arsenic, and copper.
Let me take you there. It's not only fish. We have seen also eggs. Eggs that are being corrugated and then sold, manufactured. To people. Just funny things. But the bottom line is, if we are a darling of Chinese that much, they give us much loan through Exim Bank, and we develop our country, of course the cheap loan, we should not now allow them again to kill our industries. When you go to Homa Bay, there is no single fish processing farm. They take fish from whatever they get it and all the way to Thika. That fish stays in a container for over 7 hours, while we have got a lot of fishermen in that region, the lake basin. Beta point, the economy in 2011 of that region alone was around 7 billion because of fish. Today, there's nothing. What I'm trying to say, Mike, is the government must now relook at their priorities in terms of industrializing this country. If we have got foreigners who are helping us do certain things in terms of infrastructure, then now we should also give our locals an opportunity to develop themselves through trade like fishing. Yes.
All right, Wakoli.
Mike, personally, I feel farming is a personal initiative. And I wonder why the fish from Lake Victoria, just deep from the lake, is so much, is thrice expensive at the lakeside than a fish moving from, China to Nairobi or to Kisumu. I feel Kenyans are more concerned about having affordable meal on their table. Right now, even when you look at maize, we have farmers complaining that they need subsidized fertilizer. After the government gives them subsidized fertilizer, after they produce, they want the government to buy the same maize at a very high price. You see? So when you look at this, it's like people do farming for the sake of the government, instead of looking at farming as an initiative that is going to improve your own livelihood and at the same time ensure that there's food security. So if farmers plan to do farming in terms of fish, I would wish that the fish that is coming from the lake or Turkana or wherever we have any source of fish is cheap, is affordable.
But you see, it's not the responsibility of the farmer.
This person is only using a boat.
But it's not the responsibility of the farmer to make sure.
Let's not.
I know. I might not agree with my fellow panelists here. But let us have.
But what you're saying,
government can only give
Bernard,
incentives.
wait.
Yes.
What you're trying to allude to is the fact that the farmer should go, for instance, if it's a fish farmer, go get your fish, then at whatever
Make
cost,
it affordable.
whatever cost you're getting it at, sell it to Mark Bichachi and make it affordable to Mark, despite what it has cost.
These farmers are
That's
not
his
buying. These
responsibility.
farmers are not buying fish from the water. It's a natural product. You see, so whichever cost they will put at, let it be affordable because they are competing globally.
All right, let's hear from Mark.
Let's balance this out. Number one, we must understand that it is the role of government to facilitate business.
Correct.
Okay? And to facilitate, farming is a business. Okay? The government is required.
Are you a farmer?
But not just, I am a farmer actually. I am a farmer, so I'm telling you for free that if you go to Kisumu today and you look at how many boats are captured with water hyacinth and able to go fish for days at a time, you will understand why that fish has a higher cost of production, because this particular fisherman has not been able to go fish for a while. Now, is water hyacinth a government problem or is it a farmer problem? That is number one. Number two, we must be very, very clear that number one, as a government, one of the things that the Kenyan government has done is ignored setting up the systems that farmers require to be able to sell their product. I'll give you an example. If you see the pictures of last year of potatoes and tomatoes in Kinangop, which were rotting in the farm while we were in Nairobi, we were buying them at 20 shillings a tomato. Right? The reason being that the logistics of it all, like the matatu industry in Nairobi, has been left to unscrupulous cartels who will bribe a policeman to make sure there is traffic so that he can hike the price of his matatu. Who will make sure that there is a false shortage of fish so that the price of the one fish that he does sell is increased. Now, you cannot then say that it is the fault of the farmer who has grown his tomatoes. And if today he drives his truck from Kinangop to Marikiti over here in Nairobi, cartels will kick him out. Cartels will make sure customers cannot access it. This is not even a second-hand story, I'm telling you.
That's why you are right. You are
sell pineapples in a market. I could not sell any until I sold to the cartel at a loss, so that now they could sell. So you cannot at the same time harass farmers and then blame them for not being able to bring things to market at an affordable rate. And this can only be blamed squarely on a government that has decided to take its hand away from the structures and the environment that is supposed to encourage farming. It is because of the Chinese government's policy of how to export fish and how to do things like that, that it is cheaper here in Nairobi than it is in China. It is because the guy who has a small fish farm in China can take it to a government processing facility and the fish is frozen and delivered here as a rock, whereas the guy in Kisumu who you're expecting to sell it cheaply cannot store that fish for 6 hours because it will be rotten. And so of course, what role does the farmer have in creating a fish processing plant?
And of course, there's also the question of who is benefiting from that. Who is benefiting from that fish coming from China? Because chances are you will find that there are some high-powered government individuals who maybe have companies that bring in this. And maybe this might also be a good time to just look at what was being brought about by the president. And this was conflict of interest when it comes to business. When you have somebody in government who also runs a business, because this is where now we pay that price. I would not be surprised to find that whoever is bringing in that fish is maybe somebody who's a government official or has interest in those areas. So, Kango, do you think that's an idea that maybe should be followed through when the president was talking about conflict of interest when it comes to government officials doing businesses as well?
Yes, I agree. But first of all, the president himself, when he was speaking in Strathmore University sometime last year, actually reckoned and said, why would we import fish and we have got our local fishermen? Today I'm wondering, at the same time the cabinet secretary said the fish import is here to stay. It tells you that this is a government that is not serious. Number one, even if we are going to go by legislating on the public officers not to do government with business, I think it's not going to work. But I agree, because this country, we are a country of rule of law. If we are going to follow our laws, they're already existing law. Conduct of state officers, it is there under Article 75. There's already existing law. What should a state officer not do? It's there under Leadership Integrity Act. All these things coming together must now be followed. But the most important thing is we now need to identify who are these state officers who have been doing business with government and have got this conflict of interest and they did not declare, because you have to declare at the start. Now, let me give an example. On TV last year, 2 state officers came out and declared that they were paid from the National Police on Serious Board. They were paid their maize, while the other farmers were not paid. They claim they are farmers, just like Mark is a farmer here, you know? And if you look at it, if there were millions of farmers who ought to have been paid, but these state officers used their position to get their pay, then that is wrong. And it will go back to the fish that we're talking about today. If it is true that indeed there are state officers or public officers for that matter who are involved in the importation because they're doing that business with the importers, then it is also true that they will be paid more or efficiently than the ordinary farmer or the ordinary importer. Now, this law should come into place immediately. And together with the existing laws and the constitution, then they should be protected. Not even a CS is allowed even to own, you know, these banks in foreign accounts. It's not legal. It's not right.
It's not legal. Yes. All right, and we need to wind up and now take a break. But something for you to think about and chew on. There's a story here of an Indian man who, get this, wants to sue his parents for giving birth to him. And the reason why he's suing them is because it's even difficult to say this with a straight face, they gave birth to him without his consent. I don't know where this world is headed, but that's a story that you want to read. An Indian man who wants to sue his parents because they gave birth to him without his consent. That's where we end our newspaper review. And the parents are lawyers, by the way, just so that you